All right, so our second gift that we're going to be talking about is understanding, which helps us to open up our ears, our hearts, our minds, our eyes, our souls to the people around us. It helps us to perceive things that are going on and also to understand what we have to do, what our role is, and what we can do to reach out to others and assist them. So in 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 5 through 13, we have Solomon praying to the Lord for wisdom. And he says, God says to him, ask what I should give you. And Solomon says, you've shown great and steadfast love to your servant, my father David, because he walked before you in faithfulness and righteousness and in uprightness of heart toward you. And you've kept for him this great and steadfast love and have given him a son to sit on his throne today. And now, O Lord my God, you've made your servant king in place of my father David. Although I am only a little child, I do not know how to go out or come in. And your servant is in the midst of the people whom you've chosen, a great people so numerous they cannot be numbered or counted. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, able to discern between good and evil, for who can govern your great people? It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this. God said to him, because you have asked this, and have not asked for yourself long life or riches, or for the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, I now do according to your word. I give you a wise and discerning mind. No one like you has been before you, and no one like you shall arise after you. So, God gave Solomon a chance to ask for literally anything that he wanted, and basically said, tell me, you can ask me for anything. And instead of selfishly asking for something for himself, Solomon said, I just want to know and understand what I have to do as king. I want to be able to grasp what I need to do for your people, Lord. I need to know right decisions from wrong decisions. Please just help me to understand and see what I need to do in order to be a good king. And so instead of desiring, like it says in the questions here, power or wealth, which would lead to, selfishness, greed, hoarding of materials, he asked for something that would allow him to give of himself to others. And that's what we should be striving to do, is we should be looking for the understanding that will allow us to see where we can give of ourselves to others and how we can make a good impact in the world around us. Close to that is the gift of right judgment or counsel. And that's the ability to judge between right and wrong and good and evil. That's very closely tied to the first two. We can see what's important. We can see what we should be valuing. And it helps us make choices that are not going to lead us to sin, and then not going to lead us to the things that come from sin, which it lists here like sadness, darkness, worry, death, depression. So a little later on in 1 Kings, it talks about this right judgment of Solomon's wisdom. Again, still in chapter 3, where he says, later 2 women came to the king and stood before him. And the one woman said, please, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth while she was in the house. On the 3rd day after I gave birth, this woman also gave birth. We were together, and there was no one else with us in the house. Only the 2 of us were there. Then this woman's son died in the night because she lay on him. She got up in the middle of the night and took my son from beside me while your servant slept. When I rose in the morning to nurse my son, I saw that he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning, clearly it was not the son I had born. The other woman said, no, the living son is mine, and the dead son is yours. And the first said, no, the dead son is yours, and the living son is mine. So they argued before the king. The king said, this one says that this is my son that is alive, and your son is dead, while the other says, not so. Your son is dead, and my son is the living one. So the king said, bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king. The king said, divide the living boy in 2. Give half to one and half to the other. But the woman whose son was alive said to the king, because compassion for her son burned within her, "Please, my lord, give her the living boy. Certainly do not kill him." The other said, "It shall be neither mine nor yours. Divide it." Then the king responded, "Give the first woman the living boy, and do not kill him. She is his mother." All of Israel heard of the judgment the king had rendered, and they stood in awe of the king, because they perceived that the wisdom of God was in him to execute justice. So this is an example of a method that Solomon uses to help him tell what the correct judgment is in a certain situation that was brought before him. So basically, two women, they both had infants. One woman accidentally smothered her baby in her sleep. She switched the children. And so Solomon said, since you're both saying it's your baby, why don't I just cut the baby in half? You can each have half of the body. And obviously the boy's real mother was like, no, I'd rather have him go with this other woman than be dead. So he was able to tell, like, well, obviously she's willing to sacrifice her ability to have him in order for him to live. So that's the real mom. And things like this are evident throughout the Bible. It was obviously a gruesome solution that would not have occurred to any of us to ask, but obviously Solomon's intention was never to actually do that. His intention was to figure out by the women's reactions who the true mother was, and his ability to use unique methods like this, however horrifying they might be, was an example of the wisdom and the right judgment that God had placed within him. So wisdom and understanding work together to produce the gift of right judgment or counsel. So you are able to use tools that you have at your disposal, and you're able to really look at all the evidence and weigh all the information that you have to come to a correct judgment about something, whether it's a person, a situation, a thing, and also to make the correct judgment upon others as far as whether or not, like, you should associate with them or whether you agree with their behavior, but also about yourself and what you should be doing. The fourth gift is courage or fortitude. Bravery, personal conviction, it lists also as something that could be listed. And that's demanded of us, especially now in such a secular world that we live in, where there's a lot of things in our culture and in the media that say that the values that Christians hold, that Catholics hold, are not what's cool. They're not what's thought to be, like, politically correct or appropriate now. Things like being pro-life, things like wanting modesty and chastity in one's life, being selfless and trying to do good for others instead of living in a society where we are like me. So peer pressure is everywhere. It's something that we face in school, in sports, in our extracurricular activities, in our friend groups, even perhaps at home sometimes. And it takes a lot of courage to live your faith when a lot of people around you are trying to pull you away from that. And the gift of courage that the Spirit gives us is the ability to, if we choose to do so, stand up and say no to things that we know will tarnish our souls and lead us to sin, and to live lives according to what's right and not what's popular. We see this particularly in Acts chapter 7. There's the stoning of the martyr Stephen. He was the first known martyr for the faith. And basically what happened is he was arrested on suspicion of being a Christian. And all these people were basically said, you need to deny that you're a Christian, and if you don't, we're going to kill you. So Stephen had to pick between lying and saying that he's not a Christian and denouncing his faith and living, or admitting to being a Christian and dying. And he knew that that was what the outcome would be. But he had courage and bravery, and he refused to deny Christ, and he said, no, I am a Christian. And they ended up stoning him to death. And so he was the first martyr, and obviously, like, none of us wants that kind of fate. But unfortunately, at least in our country, that's not something that we really have to worry about facing. But the point is that he showed his courage by refusing to back down from his faith, refusing to lie, refusing to sacrifice his morals and his beliefs just because somebody told him to or threatened him that he had to. And even though we don't usually have to fear death, there are other things that we can fear that might make us want to deny Christ or not live the way that we should. That could be popularity. That could be people thinking that we're cool versus thinking that we're not cool. Somebody thinking that we are somebody that they want to be friends with versus somebody that they may not want to be friends with because we don't do the same things that they do or want to hang out the same way that they do. And it takes a lot of courage to stand up and say, these are my personal convictions and I'm not going to compromise them, especially in the world we live in today. So having that gift of courage from the Holy Spirit will allow you to stay true to yourself and what you know is required of you as a Catholic, and not kind of be so easily swayed by the world and the influences that are around you. So in the next video, we've got the last 3 gifts. We're going to answer some questions, and we're going to talk about the fruit of the Spirit.